For most of us, springtime signals the start of getting back into the shop after a few months of winter hibernation. Here are 5 things that I do to dust off the cobwebs to keep my shop in good working order, and helps me make progress towards that ever-elusive shop greatness. And I can promise you that there's something in this list that you're currently not doing, so chances are you can take something and apply it to your shop. Plus, I've got a bonus tip at the end that you absolutely can't miss because it kind of prevents you from exploding. The first one I call fresh eyes, and it probably isn't something you do, or at least think about doing. You see, when we're immersed in our shop, everything becomes normalized. Everything. That means the entire layout, tools, and even messes. When we spend some time away from our shop and have an opportunity to see it with fresh eyes, we can suddenly notice small things that we may have missed or even glossed over before. Does the layout make sense for how I use it? Is there some big power tool that's in an awkward place that makes it weird to use? And just generally, what has changed since I set this place up? I'll give you some examples of what I see in my shop. When I look at the layout of my small shop, there's definitely some changes I want to make, but there's one glaring issue that I see. This small workbench I built as the base for my Craig ACS is just kind of awkwardly shoved in this corner over here. Originally, my thought was that when I wanted to use it, I would just kind of pull it out, use it, and then put it back. But as you can see, stuff happens. So that plan didn't actually work out as well as I thought. I actually really like using this thing, but when something's a pain to get to, human nature tends to take over and we take the path of least resistance. So I end up just avoiding it. So since I don't really have a great place for this in my shop, what I think I'm gonna do is move it to my new commercial space. I don't have a table saw set up there, and this can replicate most things I would do on a table saw except for long rip cuts, so I think it'd be a nice tool to have there. Plus it'll save my knees when I'm cutting things down like I currently have to do there. Another example that jumps out to my fresh eyes is this. What the what? Now, I know this has been a mess for a while now. I'm constantly reminded of it when I see it in the background of some of my videos. But like I said, it just kind of becomes normalized after you look at it for long enough. This is prime real estate and is currently absolutely wasted covered up like this. Getting this area cleared off and cleaned up means I'll have extra workbench room, and in a small garage shop, that's huge. And finally, for example number 3, we've got this little number. Yeah, this area below the drill press is just a big pile of embarrassment. I keep telling myself I'm gonna do something about this, but year after year, here we are. But one thing that jumps out to me now about this that I never really thought of before is, obviously, yes, I need to address this big pile of nothing down here, but also this area underneath the drill press is just a lot of wasted space. So it begs the question, do I really need a floor standing drill press? Or could I swap this out for a nice kind of benchtop model and build a cabinet underneath? I don't know, but it kind of goes to show that with fresh eyes, I can maybe notice things that I didn't before. And now I've got a future project idea. Okay, so you've looked at your shop objectively with fresh eyes, found some things that maybe you need to change or tweak. The next thing I like to do is take inventory. And what I mean is to take inventory of tools, consumables, and materials. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm always grabbing tools from my shop to do projects around the house. In fact, I spent the last several months building a shed in my backyard, so my tools are pretty well scattered. So do I have everything back in its place? Or do I have any new tools that need a spot? And finally, do I have any tools that need to be upgraded or replaced? I find this a good time to make a wish list for your shop that's actually based on something, and not just what some influencer tells you to buy. The next inventory I like to take is consumables and fasteners. Now, we all have our favorites that we like to use and hopefully have a place to store them. I have this bin rack built into my workbench, and over time it gets a little out of order. So I'll go through here and make sure I have all my most commonly used screws, but you can do the same thing with brads, nails, dominoes, biscuits, really anything. I don't know about you, but I absolutely hate having to stop a project mid-build because I ran out of screws. Another thing that tends to happen to something like this, and something to watch out for, is that it evolves over time. For example, you can see here that I used to store pocket hole screws and brad nails here. But after building this little organizer in this upper cabinet, which is now where my Craig jig lives, it only makes sense that the Craig pocket hole screws and brad nails now live here, so I can repurpose those for something else. And of course, you can apply the same thing to glues. Now, of course, wood glue, but what about CA glue? I used to have the perfect setup with 3 different viscosities and an activator, but over the years they were either lost, left open, or used up. So now would be a good time to replace that. And finally, you can do the same thing with raw materials. Now, for some, this may not make sense, but if you're running a small business, for example, where you're making a lot of the same things, you know what mix of material you normally use. So you can address that now, at least to get you set up for the first few projects. And tip number 3 has got to be to give some TLC to your cast iron tools. Now, depending on where you live in the world, this might be a bigger problem than for some, but it's a problem nonetheless. As the seasons change, so do temperature and humidity conditions, meaning rust. If left unprotected, cast iron will absolutely rust and corrode over time, so the best course of action is to stay proactive. Unfortunately, I have not been proactive enough with my tools, so this is what they look like. I think I've tried all of the most common remedies for cast iron tools in the past. Paste wax, glide coat, T9, black magic, and eventually they all returned to looking like this. I recently came across a product called Carbon Method that has a product called Carbon Coat that I tried on my table saw. And if you followed me at all over the last couple of years, you know that I'm not just battling rust, I'm also battling birds. Now the first obvious step to fixing a bird problem Okay, so now that we're not worrying about birds anymore, we're just worrying about rust, let's talk about Carbon Coat. What makes this product unique is that it's actually a graphene coating that coats the surface and gets into the microscopic pores of your cast iron, which once cured provides a very hard and slick surface for the tool. It's completely different than something like a paste wax or even a glide coat coating, which is gonna quickly wear off. The graphene is gonna last much longer. Let me show you just how easy this is to apply to my bandsaw table. The first step is to either remove the surface rust with either steel wool or a very fine finish sandpaper. You can even use a product like WD-40 to effectively wet sand the surface. Once it's back to bare metal, remove any lingering metal particles by wiping down with either alcohol or mineral spirits. This is now the foundation we need. Now we're ready to start the Carbon Coat process. First, we need to apply the Carbon Cleanse, which repairs the surface for the Carbon Coat product. With that done, we can now apply the Carbon Coat to this application pad and start to wipe it onto the surface. There is a pattern that's detailed in the instructions that you have to follow, but the goal is to get even coverage across the whole surface with several straight overlapping passes. After letting the coating sit for 60 to 90 seconds, you level it out by removing excess coating with the edge of the applicator. Then we need to let that sit for another 1 to 2 minutes. Next up is buffing, which is done with progressively lighter circular motions on a new clean section of microfiber cloth. Then we build up the coating to 3 to 5 layers, repeating the last couple of steps we just went through before finally allowing it to cure for a full 24 hours before use. This ensures the cast iron surface is fully protected. Finally, you can follow that up with an application of Carbon Glide for an even slicker surface. But I found that honestly, just the carbon coat is pretty slick by itself. Now, if you've done a good job and your tools are rust-free, you still need to periodically reapply some kind of protection to them. That includes this Carbon Coat product. They recommend every 6 to 12 months, but in my experience, that is way longer than anything like a paste wax or a glide coat is gonna last. Staying ahead of this is way less work than having to strip down the cast iron every time. So be proactive and use that time to, I don't know, build more stuff. And tip number 4 has got to be to check square, flatness, and alignment of your tools. Now, I'm as guilty as anyone in that I don't do this nearly often enough. And depending on how you use your shop, the frequency of these checks is going to vary, but I'd say a good starting point is at least once a year. There's some professionals out there that'll do these checks between projects, which is nuts. Just do whatever makes sense for you. And the table saw is probably the first check that I would make. I need to verify that the blade is parallel with the miter slots, and that is also parallel with the fence. There's a couple versions of this dial indicator tool, but this one from Woodpeckers is my personal favorite. It's not cheap, but it's nice. Next up, you can check the blade perpendicularity to the table, and you can check this with either a good square or a digital angle finder. Also, if your table saw has an indicator or a readout, now would be a good time to re-zero that once you get it all set up. And then obviously just move on to the other tools in your shop. If you've got a joiner, make sure that fence is perfectly 90 degrees. And while you're at it, check your disc sander and any other tool that has a fence like it. And don't forget about things like your bandsaw blade or even your drill press chuck, which you can check run out for with a dial indicator. These checks do take some time and sometimes require some additional tools to do properly. I'll leave links down to all my favorites down below in the video description. And tip number 5, I'll just call blades. This is something I've been terrible with in the past. Specifically being proactive with blade wear. I'm talking table saw blades, miter saw blades, bandsaw blades, planer and joiner cutter heads, and don't forget about your track saw blade. Blade sharpness not only affects the quality of work you can do in your shop, but is also a huge safety issue. Dull blades are dangerous and should be cleaned, sharpened, or replaced before it ever gets to that point. One thing that I've learned over the years is that buying cheap blades, or even worse, using the ones that come with the tool, just isn't worth it. They wear out, get dirty, and typically can't be resharpened once they're there. A good quality blade, on the other hand, is a great investment for your shop and well worth the money. And it really just comes down to the C word.
What did he say?
Wait, which C word were you thinking about? Carbide content. A blade with a high carbide content can be resharpened, which means that your investment lasts longer, which is even more important if it's tied to something like your livelihood. Some really good ones I've come to know and love are the Orange CMT and Ridge carbide blades. They've got carbide teeth, not carbide coated teeth, which is what makes resharpening possible, and come in a wide variety of kerf and tooth configurations. I had no idea the rabbit hole was so deep on blades. I'll leave some links down to some great options if you're looking to step up your blade game in your shop. Another thing I've never really been good about doing in my shop is cleaning my blades. Lots of people actually think they have dull blades when in fact they're just dirty with resin and sap buildup. And there's lots of simple cleaning solutions out there and in-depth videos if you want to go check those out. I'll try and put some links down below of good ones that I've found. And honestly, the cleaning process is pretty quick and easy, so there's really no excuse not to do it. So go ahead and use this time to do some much needed blade TLC in your shop before you just get so bogged down that you just never have time to do it. All right, and for the bonus tip, if you made it this far, you'll be glad you did, because I call this one the ticking time bomb. And it's over here at the air compressor. Now maybe use your air compressor all the time, or if you're like me, you just kind of use it infrequently, but either way, you can't escape this one. When's the last time you drained the water from your air tank? Or did you even know that was a thing? If you look at the bottom of any air compressor tank, there should be a small valve to drain out that condensed water. Because as air is compressed, the water condenses out of it and collects in the bottom of your tank. I actually did a god-awful video as one of the first videos I ever did on my channel, and it was on this topic, where I made this simple little stand with this little reservoir I can slide in and out just to make the task a lot easier. And the reason you should care about this is because your air tank is made of carbon steel, and much like the cast iron tools we saw earlier, it will rust and corrode. And enough rust and corrosion could cause the tank to rupture and eventually explode. So unless you want a bomb going off in your shop, you should just try and keep that drained as much as possible. Remember that just like ourselves, our shops are always changing, and it's up to us to keep them in good shape. Why make it harder on ourselves to get projects done in a messy, poorly set up, and even dangerous space? I'd love to know if there's any good tips that you have that we can share with others, so leave those down in the comments, and I will see you guys at the next project. And until then, keep pursuing shop greatness.